Emotion regulation is something we talk about a lot in psychology, especially in parenting, but just in general. And we really focus on people who are emotionally dysregulated. And the way I like to see that is through a metaphor of a faucet. So when a person is emotionally dysregulated, it's like the faucet is just on turned on full blast and the water is splashing everywhere outside of the sink, and you're feeling kind of overwhelmed by seeing sort of the mess that's being created when we're in that state of dysregulation. So people who are dysregulated, we do really well when we do our breathing, when we slow ourselves down, when we learn mindfulness practices around being present and noticing what's good around us, and also through a good meditation practice. These are all things that help us kind of lower the tap, not shut it down. So this is what I want to really emphasize here. We want to learn to regulate ourselves so that we're in a balanced place, because the dysregulated people, we also actually really experience big emotions in a good way. We can feel full joy and full deep despair and sadness, which that's how emotions work. It's sort of a bigger, it's an expanding bubble. It's not one-sided. But as we practice mindfulness and gratitude and meditation and breathing, we can notice the more joyful things and the peaceful parts of our lives more often than not. So the idea here is to bring ourselves to a balanced state through those practices. The other extreme, though, is being overregulated. And overregulated people can come across as fine, we're good, like all is well, sort of a sensation. But what ends up happening is that they've sort of regulated their emotions so much that it's very tight. So they're not necessarily feeling the bigger emotions in terms of despair and sadness, but they're also potentially missing out on greater states of peace and joy and love. So the metaphor for that is that the faucet is really tightly closed, right? And when it's so tightly closed, it's the people that are around those people who are tightly closed are like looking for water. They're not getting overwhelmed by the water the way the dysregulated person would be splashing around, but instead it's like, is there any water? Is there anything? I need something. And there tends to not be a lot to give away in terms of our emotion, because we're, again, so held tightly. It's really tightly shut. So what we need to do, if we think maybe we're a bit overregulated, is to take tiny little steps at cracking that faucet open a little bit, so it starts trickling, feeling the safety of expressing ourselves a little bit more, right? And as we do that, we can slowly expand out so that we're also meeting at a balanced place. And the benefits of doing that is to be able to experience emotion in healthy ways so that we can live this full life, not just a fine life or an okay life or a content life. That's great too, but we can also be fully present with the people in our lives, show emotion, and engage in ways that are really, really healthy for us. Because at the end of the day, when I've closed off my emotional tap completely, I still have stressors, I still have things going on in my life, and I'm putting them away somewhere in my body, and we can then become ill in physical ways. So we want to really, again, find ways to just safely open up. And just to sort of summarize all of this, the reason a lot of people shut that tap down is when they're younger, they're feeling overwhelmed. There's a sort of highly sensitive personality that can feel overstimulated, overwhelmed. If there's chaos in their environment growing up, they learn to just become more closed, don't disrupt anything, let things just be. I'm just going to kind of hide, go under the radar, and that feels safer. So the problem with that is, of course, they learn that that's just the way to be, and then we have sort of a more narrow way of looking at the world, and lose out on the energy of our creativity and using that part of our brain, the imagination and the flow and the fun and the emotional parts, are lost because we're sort of just, nope, we kind of need to be obedient. We need to do things the way we're expected to do things, not rock the boat, keep things tight, closed, just so, right? But again, there's a downside to that. So for the dysregulated, we just can't seem to close ourselves off even if there's chaos around us. We just kind of join right in. So we need to learn, because that can be overwhelming for others. We need to learn how to regulate that through those practices. And for those of us who might be identifying as a bit more tight that way, let's make it safe for us, right? We can open that tap up a little bit at a time and take the little risks of being a little bit bigger emotion and see that it's okay now, right? That we've created safety in our life to be able to allow that, so that we can all come to that balanced place.